The hi-hats. Not as simple as some people may think. There's several aspects to hi-hats. Firstly, you can get a really wide range of sounds from them, depending on whether you are above, below, or around the side. And that's why it's worth having a listen. As a general purpose, just have to put it up and not think about it. Somewhere just off the top is fine. Very high SPL off these things, very high frequency content. It's a job for a condenser mic. And often this is where you'd use a pad too. Pads you often really need for very high, low frequency content, but the real sizzle, the stick on these things, the sizzle of the metal on metal can give you very high peaks. So a pad will save possibly overloading the mic or the next stage, the input of the desk. That's your general purpose, fairly close. You can get a bit of movement here, the thing opening and closing. It's more of a specialist sound around here, and depends on the sound, but you really get that sizzle of them opening and closing as you get round the side. Underneath works. You hear the different cymbal, but it's a closer sound and you get less spill from the other drums. Which brings us to overheads. And again, as a general rule, they're called overhead because you put the mic over them. And again, I'd call that a normal sort of position. It physically needs to be off the cymbal a bit so that it doesn't get struck by a drumstick, and that'll give you what you'd describe as an average sound. It's very common to see overheads raised up much higher. I don't do that so much myself. Again, a little bit of this is personal taste. But I do get scared when I see the overhead pairs up a long way above the kit. That's a weird place. It's a strange stereo view, and if you listen to those channels, they're very roomy. You're a long way off. You're hearing the whole kit. Yes, you are hearing overheads, but you're hearing a lot of room and just a lot of sound that comes from the space as well as the source. Yeah, so in that sense, close miking of cymbals does make sense to me. And for crash cymbals, you may as well just stick the mic up above it. There's not anything wrong with putting it underneath. It is a different sound. It's a media, almost hollowy sort of sound you get underneath that, I don't know, it varies from cymbal to cymbal. Some people go, oh, they like it. It's direct, you get more bell sound. But I think you get less splash, less crispness perhaps underneath. That's one that's worth listening before deciding. And the same way with the ride. Again, if you're just looking to hear the ride, somewhere near it. Now, as a tip, rides are always softer or harder to hear than the crash cymbals, generally speaking. Some people, when they go for the ride, get right up on the bell here and it really honks out. That's good. You can hear it, but you don't get a great deal of shimmer. So if anything, rides need to be mic'd closer than crash cymbals, and if the bell sound is important in any way, then you can get it right over. So you do get lots of that mid-range sort of cowbelly tone that you get. And underneath. Underneath works better for rides than it does for crash cymbals, because the bell sound's perhaps more important, I suppose, and if you're under there, it isolates the ride. So if you've got a drummer who has a ride that really needs to be prominent and needs to be heard when he goes to it, consider underneath. It doesn't really do any harm, and it looks good. But before you do anything with the cymbals, it's really worth having a listen to it above, putting it underneath, putting it on the side, and just having a listen. Sometimes you think, it doesn't make enough to, it's not going to make enough difference to the sound, I'll put it where it looks best or is most convenient. But sometimes you go, oh, that's quite a distinctive difference. And you may want to choose on that basis.